I saved the Dogman's life. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I've got a story about the Dogman and my father and me. It's also kind of the story of the biggest disagreement I ever had with my dad. Something we still can't agree about to this day. But mostly, it's a story of my friendship with one particular Dogman who has a heart just as big as he is. And he is big. This happened at our former house, where we used to live, until Dad found out about the Dogman. It was in Michigan, pretty far north but not all the way. In the area around Houghton Lake and Higgins Lake, there are a number of other tiny lakes there as well. We lived near one of them, in a house surrounded by the woods. My dad does magic computer stuff that I don't understand. That's how he earns money. And then he hunts to provide me and Mom with food to eat. So it's like his mind goes to the city to work, but his body and soul are always here with me and Mom. Dad does have good friends, and occasionally they used to come out and visit us on holidays. But generally he's a loner, and I've learned to take after him. Not as a hunter. I can't even lift his rifle, and I don't have the patience to ever get good at it, but I am a loner in my own kind of way. Sometimes Mom gets uptight about me being alone out in the forest, but in those days Dad would always just shrug and say, she's her father's daughter, and go back to whatever he was doing. I mean, that's how he acted until he found out that I had made friends with a Midwestern Dogman. The woods behind our house were not that large, but they connected with other woods that were. Roscommon State Forest was south of us, Hartwick Pine State Forest was north, and we were surrounded by large wild areas that all sorts of fantastical beasts inhabit. Trust me. By the way, I don't want to suggest that what I was doing with the Dogman was normal, or that it was safe to do it. If you're sane, then please don't imitate me. I just happen to have bats in my belfry, and so I got to be friends with the Dogman. I'm punished for it every day now. Dad moved us to the suburbs. The closest thing I've got to the woods these days is a park in town that I can take a bus to. When I complain about it, Dad says it's better than if I had gotten eaten by that Dogman. But he doesn't understand. That Dogman was not a human eater. He is not a human eater, I mean. I still hope to find him again one day. My dream is to get rich and buy back our old house, then turn it into a nature preserve, and let the Dogman live there free, forever. Right now, a family of hunters live there, and I wonder each day if my oversized dog-headed friend is still safe. There's nothing I can do about it now, so I try not to think about it. Let me tell you how I first met the Dogman. It's kind of an interesting story if you listen to what it's telling you. I told Dad this story 3 times, but he refused to listen to what it was saying. I like to walk places in the woods that I'm not familiar with, but I do it incrementally. Like, I'll walk 5 or 10 minutes into unexplored territory, then go back to where I know the land. Then next time I can go 5 or 10 minutes further before I turn back, and so on. One day when I was walking on unfamiliar ground in the spring, I stepped on what I thought were some old leaves from the previous winter lying on the ground. It was actually a somewhat deep pile of leaves in a crevice on a cliff, and when I stepped in, I slipped and tumbled down a fairly steep hill that I hadn't even noticed until I was rolling down the side of it. Dad had taught me what to do if something like this happened. He taught me to pull my arms and head in when I was rolling, and I was doing my best not to injure myself, when something large grabbed me. I literally couldn't even imagine what had just wrapped itself around me, but whatever it was had entirely gripped me from my belly down to almost my knees. I was no longer rolling, and I opened my eyes to see what looked like giant, hairy fingers wrapped around me tightly. I screamed bloody murder because I didn't know what was happening, and the fingers loosened in surprise, dropping me hard into a pile of old rotting leaves. I nearly swallowed some, and I spit them out. Then I turned around fast to look at King Kong behind me, because that's what I kind of expected I was gonna see. I was in a giant monkey movie, that's what I thought. But when my eyes met my savior, it was not an ape at all, of any kind. It was a big old pooch, but I mean the biggest and largest old pooch I had ever seen. It was like a canine that grew up into some kind of a man. It had hands, big hands, and that had to have been how it caught me. It was standing up on its hind legs, which I had never seen a dog do before. Now me, I fear no canine, so I was extremely happy to see this guy. I started talking to him as if he were my friend, right from the get-go, and his eyes looked so happy. He wanted a friend as much as I did. Anyway, he stopped me from falling, but I wouldn't really call it saving my life exactly, because I do know how to take a fall. But it was very nice of him to catch me the way he did, and we were friends right from the start. Dad says that from the second that interaction was over, I should have been extricating myself from the situation, but dogs are my friends. We are on the same wavelength, and Dad just can't understand that. He says that the Dogman is a carnivore, but that's wrong right from the start. I've seen Dogman eat brownies. I've given him bananas to eat, and you know what? He loves blueberry yogurt by Chobani. That's an unpaid endorsement, although if Chobani wants to pay me, that's okay in my book. My Dogman friend is not a carnivore. He's an omnivore. That's the word for him. He eats anything, just like some other dogs I've known. So I was saying he was the size of King Kong, but I want to be more clear about that. There was a less famous old movie my dad showed me called Mighty Joe Young. It's about a big ape who makes friends with a young woman just like me. Joe isn't as big as King Kong. He's the size of my Dogman though. Well, maybe Dogman was a little smaller. I mean, I think he was taller than a tall bear, but he wasn't King Kong. I mean, he isn't King Kong. I want to keep referring to him in the present tense. I do hope I get to see him again one day. So, playing fetch with a good dog is one of the most fun things that anyone can ever do. Playing fetch with the Dogman, though, that brings it all to an epic new level, unlike anything you've ever experienced before. Throw a frisbee for the Dogman to chase, and watch him bounce off of tree trunks and vault over small hills to grab that flying hunk of plastic mid-air for epic catches. There's nothing a regular dog or a human friend can do that the Dogman can't do in a far more spectacular way. You know, now that I think of it, there was a time when the Dogman might have actually saved my life. At least, he once again saved me from bad injury. We were walking through the woods with me taking the lead and talking to him about something. I would tell the big guy my feelings because he was a good listener. I think after a while he started to understand some of what I was saying. Like he knew that when I said snackies, or snacky time, or when I called him Snacky Chan, that meant I would give him some smoked meat that I had snuck out of our basement. We had a lot of smoked meat in those days, mainly venison, and I would share it with my friend. I figured that whatever time he spent with me was time that he couldn't spend hunting for food, so I should sort of reimburse him for his time by bringing food with me, you know? It made sense to me back then. So that Dogman at least knew a few words in English, and I would pour out my heart to him so that I could have one person in the world who could know everything about me. So I was doing that one day when I stepped right through these bushes and was confronted by a very angry, very snarly, very low to the ground mountain lioness that looked just about ready to pounce upward and eat my face off. I heard mewing around my feet, and I realized I had walked into a bunch of this woman's children. She thought I was threatening her kittens, and so she wanted my story terminated quickly and permanently. I couldn't blame her. That's how I'd feel about anyone who threatened my kids if I had any. It was completely my fault that this was happening, and I felt sorry. and apologetic. Unfortunately, the mountain lioness did not understand as many words in English as my Dogman friend did, and I was failing in my efforts to back away from this oncoming, violent conflict. The next thing I knew, I was blinded. Then, I felt a squeezing sensation around my midsection, and my entire body felt dizzy, as though I were being lifted off the ground and tilted. Everything smelled sweaty and musty in that darkness, until my feet were plopped down on the ground again, and I could suddenly see. Looking up and around, I understood what had just happened. The Dogman had reached over from behind me and put his large hand right down over my head and torso, gripping me around my belly with the tips of his massive and strong fingers. Then he lifted me up in the way you lift up a chess piece off a board, and he put me down again behind him. I was safe, and he was exchanging snarls with the mountain lion and her cubs instead. The matriarch of the feline fam was more willing to negotiate with the Dogman than she had been with me, and soon everybody backed away from everybody else. I loved that Dogman, and if he didn't love me back, then I would have ended up gourmet cat food on that day. Sometimes we would wander into areas that hunters frequented, or they would stray into ours. One time we heard shots way too close to where we were, and I swear the Dogman tossed me on his shoulder like I was his little toddler, and then he got us both out of there. His legs were so long, and he was able to move us both faster than I could have moved myself. It was then that I realized he came out of the fast lane of his kind of life to be my friend, you know? Walking with a short-legged critter like me forced him into the slow lane, and yet he did that just for me. Well, me and smoked venison, too. In my opinion, Dogman will go from being thought of as a myth to being thought of as a monster and a predator, to being seen with respect and fear the way we see bears and mountain lions, to being domesticated and educated in the future. You know, I might be crazy, but I'm curious to see what happens by the time I'm an old lady, you know? If this one Dogman turned out to be adaptable to learning some human ways from me, why wouldn't humans and Dogmen eventually sort of domesticate each other? I'm kinda not joking. I mean, we'd be better off collaborating than eating each other or whatever. So now let's get to the day when everything in my life crashed into everything else in my life. I was out playing with the Dogman in the woods, and I didn't know that Dad was out hunting in those same woods. This had never happened before, and it was careless of me to stray over into that area, because I knew he hunted over there. I just hadn't been watching where the Dogman and I were going. It was a free-spirited kind of a morning for us. The Dogman entered a clearing, and I was about to follow, when I saw a light glinting off of something on the other side of that clearing. Very little in nature glints in the light that way, besides maybe water. It was likely something metallic or glass that I had seen, and that means something man-made. If it's man-made, it's logically being carried by a human, and my Dogman friend was walking right into that clearing. I ran in front of him, not fully knowing why. Some part of me told me that if I didn't run as fast as I could right then, my Dogman friend was going to have his life story ended very suddenly and dramatically. I was in a full state of panic without any conscious understanding of why. Then I got in front of that giant pooch, and my eyes took in the horrifying sight of my own father lining up a shot at my best friend in the entire world. I screamed pathetically. I waved my arms in the air, and BAM! That shot got fired anyway. I collapsed to my knees, gasping for air as though I had been the one to take the shot. I thought the worst, But when I looked behind me, my giant Dogman friend was still standing tall, although he was giving my dad the stink eye. Dad had pulled his shot. He had fired up over the creature's head because of my caterwauling, and he was standing there with an expression so pained, you'd have thought he hit himself with the shot. The Dogman was baring his teeth at my dad, and for the first time, I saw how large they were. Are. He growled so deeply that it hurt deep inside my ears, and it made the bottoms of my feet tingle. Now I turned around to face my friend, and I told him, "Hey, that's my dad." I told my dad, "Hey, this is my friend." I wanted them both to calm down, and I didn't want anyone to get hurt. I had never seen this side of the giant pooch man before. He could have easily destroyed my dad. And I don't think Dad's Ruger #1, as fancy and expensive as it is, would have evened the odds. My huge friend was gentle and kind, to me, but I suddenly understood that if properly motivated, that same lovable teddy bear could also be a hideous, terrifying monster. Literally a monster. I gave that Dogman a big hug, and then I told him that's my dad, and I'm gonna go home with my dad. I looked the Dogman in the eyes, and I don't know if he understood, but he did look less angry. We hugged again, and then I went home with Dad. I felt so relieved that I had stopped the fighting before it really happened, and I stupidly thought that was going to be the end of the two of them arguing. I was even hoping that Dad and the Dogman could get to know each other. Well, that wasn't how Dad saw it at all. He was in a state I'd never seen him in before. He was so upset, but I couldn't call it anger exactly. It was kind of like he just couldn't believe what I had done, that he just had nothing in his dad rule book that covered a situation like this. He wasn't exactly disappointed in me, but I could tell he was stunned that I was putting him through this. His worldview on this was just so different from mine that we were having a hard time communicating at all. Dad lectured me about how wild animals are wild. I already knew that. He pointed out that it's literally illegal to interact with bears in the way that I was interacting with the Dogman. I argued back that the Dogman is far more intelligent than a bear, and far more loyal, too. I told him that we were friends. Dad asked me if I was really so sure that he was my friend. I was like, what does that mean? We play frisbee together. And Dad was like, well, maybe Big Fido just likes to play with his food. And so no matter what I said, Dad moved us all away from there. I know he meant well, and I know he thinks he did the right thing for me and Mom. I can't bring myself to agree with him, though. I miss my friend, and I'm not really enjoying living in the suburbs. The forest is like a guy who's let his beard grow long and free. The suburbs is a guy who was forced to get a haircut and a shave, you know? He's still the same animal underneath, but in the suburbs, he shaves off his fur, and he pretends to be something that he's not. The woods is real. The suburbs is too, but it's trying not to be. Every second I have to be out here is painful. I feel like I'm living life on the set of a bad old phony sitcom. I was telling this one girl out here in the suburbs about the Dogman. The girl asked me where the photos of it were. I told her I didn't take any, that I hate carrying a cell phone with me, and that the Dogman didn't want his picture taken anyway. She told everyone I was crazy, and that I talked to imaginary giant teddy bears. You know, I wish I could feed that girl to my giant teddy bear, because he is far from imaginary. But even he can't catch me when I'm falling out here in the suburbs. These days, I'm not allowed to go walk in the woods alone. These days, Dad and Mom force me to bring my stupid cell phone with me so they can monitor where I'm going. I hate it. I never use the stupid thing. I don't care about human friends. I miss my one true best friend. I want to go home and I want to see the Dogman. I don't want to leave my parents, but I am growing up, so that's gonna happen anyway. Do I leave them to have a sad, lonely life alone in the suburbs? Or in a city? Or do I leave them here to go back to those woods and search for my friend? Maybe he needs me. If those hunters living in our old house are unwise, they may already have hurt him or chased him away from the area. But maybe if I went back to live in those woods, I could protect him. Same as I protected him from my dad the last time. Because no matter what else you might want to say about it, nobody can deny that I saved the Dogman's life. We hail the great one Godzilla Tim Walker, a name that brings joy to all of us squawkers. He brings entertainment, a much needed break. His presence brings hope to all nations so great. He's here to stay, a real monster of fame. His presence we cherish through good times and pain. Stories and campfires and toasting of s'mores. Tim is our champion, our hero, and more. So let us bow down to the king of the hour. For Godzilla Tim Walker, with Godzilla power. He's here to stay, this polyonym. Today's episode brought to you by Godzilla Tim. Please join us in thanking today's wonderful executive producer Godzilla Tim from Ireland in the UK. Tim just sent us a special one-time donation that I really appreciate. So thank you times 3, as Long Island Bigfoot is known to say. If you would like to make a one-time donation to our channel, you can either do it through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page, as Tim did, in which case I'll get it right away. Or you can use the handy-dandy little thanks button under each of our videos here on YouTube. I think there's also a way to donate on Rumble? I don't really know. I should ask Julie Sadler. She seems to watch us on Rumble. Not ask her to donate, but forget it. I'm just going to ask our international TV spokesmongrel Henry Lee Dogman to explain it instead. Hank? Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that when it cuts off after I think 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.